There's no more victim when you're connected to your power. There's no more victim when you're looking inside of yourself instead of outside of yourself for help. A lot of it came from just this dependence from, I learned it from my parents, from the culture, that alcohol is the answer, right? It makes you feel better. You have a drink, a martini, and that's it. The stress of the day is gone. It's not healing anything. It's not real. True masculine energy has the ability to go into emotion and feel. Like that doesn't, if you're an emotional person, that doesn't mean you're not a man. It means, in my eyes, that you're more closer to what a real man actually is.
All right, greetings all and welcome back to Living Once Twice, the place where we rewrite narratives, reinvent ourselves, and reimagine our lives. Thank you all for tuning into today's episode. Now, before we dive in, please be sure to give us a follow on Instagram at Living Once Twice. And don't hesitate to subscribe to the YouTube channel. As you know, we are featuring all of this season's guests and the amazing conversations on our YouTube channel, including today's guest, who I'm very excited to bring on, which is Danny Morley. Danny is a certified mystical life and relationship coach at Masters of Self University. Additionally, you can listen to Danny as he serves as co-host of the Masters of Self University podcast. Through coaching and sharing the teachings of Rachel Fiore, Danny has devoted his life to his own personal healing and helping others on their own journey to mental, emotional, and spiritual mastery. Danny, welcome to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
What an introduction. Thank you. I'm doing very well. Glad to be here with you.
Danny, I appreciate you. I know we chatted a little bit before we hit record. And again, I got to give the folks some context how I learned about you. I was really fortunate to get to interview your partner, Ellie, last season in episode 55. And as I highlighted in your bio, I've had a lot of time to listen to various episodes of you on the Masters of Self University podcast. And I just can't thank you enough for serving as a role model to so many men out there like myself. You're trailblazing because it's not common to find men talking about their walk in vulnerability, their walk in healing. And you do it so openly, so transparently. And even as you just shared with me a little bit earlier, like even as you're in the midst of it. And so I thank you for offering yourself because it's showing us men that the road to healing, as I shared with you personally, like the road to healing some of my own toxic programs, toxic behaviors, there's a pathway there. We can become whole. We can become healthier versions of ourselves. So again, I thank you for offering yourself in this journey to so many of us.
My pleasure. We need more men in this space. We need more men to open up about what they're struggling with, what their hardships are, what the programs are, what their wounds are. There's not enough of it. And that makes it challenging for someone like you or I who is kind of paving this way. Because it is kind of unknown territory in some degree. But it has to be done. And, this is kind of like my life's work. It's what my soul chose for me to experience this time around. So I'm here for it all.
And that's what I think is going to make today's conversation so powerful is because of what you've learned and what you're going to be sharing. And so I guess there's a lot of places I want to go. I want to talk about embracing pain. I want to talk about the whole aspect of what does it mean to be a man in this world, also giving ourselves grace in this journey. But where I want to start, Danny, I want to start with really your road to awakening and your road to really like your healing. And so I'm going to start with a quote that you shared. As I've heard you say, I used to think that I was happy, but a lot of it was masked by the fact that I was just using alcohol. So for people not familiar, Danny, with your upbringing, could you share more about like how you grew up and what was the relationship that like alcohol had played in your teenage years and in your early 20s?
Yeah, I'm originally from the UK, grew up over there, now living in the US in San Diego. And growing up, there was a heavy influence of alcohol. That was as part of the culture. That's what you do when you're a teen. You start drinking quite young. I think I first got drunk with my parents around 12. And then that became kind of like the norm as I kind of started to get to like 15, 16. And while it allowed me to find certain aspects of myself, to really kind of find parts of myself that were passionate and fun and loving and full of enthusiasm and joy, it also came at a price with obviously the hangovers and the dependence on needing a substance, needing something outside of me to feel free, to feel okay, to feel good. And it was really it all kind of correlates to this kind of period in 2018 when I started waking up to really like what misery I was in, and something happened through recreational drug use and too much alcohol that my psyche kind of cracked open, and then it was like the dark night of the soul. It was the spiral down into severe depression. It was all the things that were kind of trapped inside of me that I'd done such a good job at not looking at, for my own safety, for my own emotional health, to just survive and get by. It all started pouring out. So when I was young, I learned, just have a drink and you can connect with yourself. And later, like 2018, I couldn't use alcohol in the same way anymore. So it led to a very kind of dark time. And I realized there was this moment I had in India. I was at the Holi festival where they use all the colors and they throw it on each other. And it was basically like a 72-hour rave. And this was in the beginning of 2019. And I'm looking around at everyone, and everyone is completely sober and just free. Dancing around in India, everyone's just free, having so much fun. And I couldn't get out of my shell because there was no alcohol. And not only was there no alcohol in the whole city I was in, the place that I was at is I knew that alcohol would have just made me feel even worse because I was in such like emotional pain at that point, because the depression was really coming out, which I'd suppressed, which I didn't know then from my childhood. And so, yeah, like I really used alcohol to find happiness. Well, I thought that was what it was, right? I thought that having a drink to take the edge off, to make myself feel a little better, and to be able to connect with friends, to not feel the social anxiety, to be able to enjoy a music show. Even in my teens, I remember being like 17 and I would have a few drinks with dinner with my dad, and I would take the bottle of wine upstairs to finish, to have a glass of wine while I was watching like One Tree Hill, like, teen TV shows. And the program that I was kind of feeding into was that like, and I used to sleep with a glass and a bottle of whiskey next to my bed because I thought that was like what cool men do. Like, this is what you do when you're like an adult and you've grown up and you want to like access your emotions. As you get drunk, you have a drink. You wake up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep and you pour a glass of whiskey, and that's what it means to be a man. And as fast forward then to like this period of like more deeper awakening and a dark night of the soul, I couldn't use those same coping mechanisms of alcohol because it would make me feel like really unstable. So I had to start again and figure out life in a new way. And therein lies all of the internal growth. But a lot of it came from just this dependence from, I learned it from my parents, from the culture, that alcohol is the answer, right? It makes you feel better. You have a drink, a martini, and that's it. The stress of the day is gone. That's not healing anything. It's not real.
Yeah. No, thank you for offering that journey, Danny. And one of the things you hit on, and I think for folks listening out here, it's like some of the self-sabotaging behaviors that catch up to us in adulthood, we never think back to the root. And the root of it, as you were explaining, a lot of this just kind of started in childhood. It started in your upbringing, and slowly these things become like coping mechanisms for us, and use that word kind of, it was just kind of masking some of the voids that you didn't have any other kind of outlet or healthy other outlet to turn to. So obviously, alcohol filled that void, and it kind of came to its own kind of turning point for you as you were talking about your experience in India. And Danny, there's one word that you've used there of like using it to take the edge off. And I know you've talked about how a part of us starting to like do this kind of rediscovery is asking ourselves, why is that edge there in the first place?
Right.
And if you don't mind, like, can you speak more to, as you start to kind of unpack, why was that edge there of needing alcohol to do that, to serve in that capacity there for you in the first place, and kind of what you discovered as you start to peel back that onion?
Yeah, the edge is there because we're so disconnected from ourselves. We're so disconnected from our own heart. So we need something to make us feel okay, because we grew up in a world where our parents were not enlightened. We grew up in a world where everyone is disconnected from their higher selves. And so we don't know how to be okay. We're trapped in this looking outside of ourselves. We're trapped in the parent child. We are the child looking for something, looking for mommy or daddy to save us in many moments in our life. Because when we were children, we weren't taught, hey, I know that you think you need me right now, but I'm going to teach you how to energetically connect to your power, to grow your light and be able to heal whatever's coming up right now. And when we don't do that, when we close ourselves off from our own power, our own divinity, our own heart, all of a sudden all this stuff starts building up in there. And as you go through life, disconnected from your heart, now filling up this entire room full of all this stuff that you haven't still processed. Every time that you may have done something slightly out of alignment from your soul, there's a layer of guilt and shame that we have to feel and process to know that, oh, that maybe wasn't the most loving thing that I've done right there. And when we don't look at any of that, we don't learn how to process and open, it stays in our blind spot, it stays hidden. And that's what we're feeling often in the everyday life, whether or not we're aware of it or not. That edge is there because there is all this suppressed or repressed energy that's causing us some level of dis-ease or dysregulation. My nervous system for a long time was going crazy. It was like nuts because I was super sensitive and didn't realize how much was inside that I needed to open and start to process and heal. And so when we don't learn that as a child, and then we don't do it through our teenage years or our 20s, all the way up to whenever it is that you kind of have that breaking moment where it has to come out in one way or another. And whether that comes out in a manifested disease, or whether it comes out in panic attacks like I used to have, or whatever it is, whatever destructive behavior that energy can lead you into, which in my case, it was like partying too hard and really disconnecting from myself, that then we have that wake up moment, like, oh, something deeper is going on here. And then it's our choice on whether or not we want to fall back into the same patterns, as you mentioned earlier, the coping mechanisms, or whether we want to actually awaken and raise our level of consciousness. And as you mentioned earlier, find the root cause. Why is this happening? And often I found, like, this is the work that I coach people through, it's hard to get to the root immediately. The root cause of what is going on takes a while of picking, of undoing, of understanding what program and then what layers we need to feel and heal under there to get down there. But at least to make that beginning journey inwards and stop looking outside of ourselves for the answer and turn inwards and find out, okay, well, let me look at what's going on here. Maybe this anxiety is here for a reason, and maybe I need to address why it's here.
You're starting to kind of go exactly the direction I want to head to next, Danny, because now you're saying, like, okay, I know that this coping mechanism is not serving me, and you clearly outline that, okay, in order to kind of turn the corner and start to do the change, it's not going to happen overnight. No. And so I'd love to hear you explain or walk us through what was the process of taking responsibility like? Like, what were some of the growing pains? I know you talked about experiencing anxiety, but it's not like, 1 week you recognize that this is an unhealthy coping mechanism you need to change. Like, did you still struggle with finding yourselves in environments where alcohol was still present? How did you deal with, say, maybe being around friends that maybe still drunk? Like, what were some of the growing pains of your journey to trying to become more responsible and accountable and really doing the inner work to reconnect with your heart, as you were talking about?
Wow, everything you just said, I could do a 3-hour podcast just on that one sentence alone. So let's start breaking some of that down. Well, the first thing is, like, for me, when all this started unraveling in 2018, 2019, for me, it was a kind of like a 2-year period from 2018 to 2020 of like extreme kind of darkness, I would say. And one of the biggest blocks I had was I went from being someone who was very in tune with their emotions, very I kind of enjoyed the fact that I could go to a movie and watch it with maybe a girl, and I would be the one who was crying at the movie and she wasn't. That was always kind of like the man who I've been, the person who I am, even if I didn't embrace that at the time. And so having that power, that ability to feel so deeply, and then during this period, everything got shut off. So I went emotionally numb. So it wasn't that I felt at times really, really, really dark, which I did. It was that a lot of the time I couldn't feel anything. I remember when my cousin passed away in 2019, and I remember I couldn't process the grief, because I was so just, my emotions were done. They were like, we can't cope with what's coming up right now. So something inside just switched it off. So that was one of the biggest challenges, was going from a person who felt so deeply to not feeling at all. And then when the feelings would come through, I had my first suicidal thought outside the Taj Mahal. I was staring at this wonder of the world in India, like, wow, like, this is incredible. And then I'm walking by the side, by the river, and the thought pops into my head saying, yeah, you could just end it right now, and then you wouldn't have to feel all this misery. And I was like, where are these thoughts coming from? I've never felt like this in my life. And so, like, these are the moments when, okay, there's got to be something deeper that's going on here. And at the time, I really struggled with the fact that there was a big stigma against being mentally ill. And I had to really accept the fact that I was suffering from depression and severe anxiety and suicidal thoughts and whatever else, all this. There was a lot of dissociation going on, hence the numbness, the lack of feeling. And getting over that stigma was the first hurdle, really accepting where I'm at. Okay, I am actually in need of help right now. And this comes back to this whole idea of being a manly man. We're led to believe in society that men need to be strong, kind of emotionless, and the only thing we can feel is anger, because we're allowed to be angry because we're men, but we're not allowed to feel anything else. So anything else is considered weak. It's considered like you're not a man if you're so emotional, or you're fragile. So there was all of this like stigma against actually opening up and accepting the fact that I was internally struggling. And once I got over that barrier and started to openly share and dealt with the shame that my parents were then kind of naturally, because this is the collective programming, like, oh, you're not mentally ill. Like, oh, yeah. It's like, no, I am. Like, I need you to accept this part of me in the way that I'm accepting it too. And then, so moving through that, then that allowed me to kind of get to the next place. Because once we like accept what it is that's going on, then we can actually start diving in and doing the work. But until we accept what it is, which is known as surrender, until we fully surrender into the path that we're on, then we can start really moving forward, because we're not resisting what's happening. And that process takes time to really sit with the fact, okay, yeah, there is deeper stuff here that wants to come up and be seen and be loved, and that's okay. So let me start to dive in. And then the next kind of big blocks were around the fact that my entire career was as a bartender. So for the last 11 years, that my life has been either waiting tables, serving, or bartending all across America, across the UK. And my entire livelihood, my career, everything was based around alcohol. So I quit bartending last year, which meant there was a period of 3-4 years of still being in this industry, which I felt so unaligned with, which was so painful for my soul. I could feel there was these moments a few years ago when I was supplementing my income with working at a brewery. I normally worked in luxury hospitality, but I started working for a brewery. I thought it'd be a great change of pace. And as I would open the tap and hold the glass and watch the beer flow out, I could feel my soul going, what the hell are you doing? You are made for so much more than this. You came here to experience like the depth of life, not this. Like, you need to move on. And so that layer of it was really difficult, and dealing with all of the, I wanted to get better, but I didn't know how. And then running into a bunch of walls of the different coping mechanisms and healing modalities that I tried until 2021 when I found Rachel Fiore's work.
Yeah, that's incredible. Just to kind of hear you share like the different layers and levels to this, Danny, from the whole aspect of awakening, but then just the struggle of the emotions. Because now that you're not numbing yourself, you talked about kind of this wave of emotions hitting. But there's something interesting you were talking about, is how like a part of this shedding the layers was you talking with loved ones, with your support system, for many people, your family, about you're trying to move in a new direction, you're trying to get help, you're trying to change. But then you can correct me on this, it sounded like almost the feedback for you was like, well, you're not mentally ill, almost not taking serious what you're sharing. And I don't know if you also encounter this with friends of yours when you're kind of walking this path that your spirit is telling you alcohol no longer is serving you. If they're also like, do you have friends that are also telling you like, wait, what are you talking about? You don't drink anymore. Like you're the bartender, you're Danny, we know you from having a good time. Like, what other ways were the friendships or the relationships around you, were you starting to see there being this kind of tension of people also accepting this new identity that you're walking into, this new layer of skin that the old layer of skin that you're shedding, this new layer of skin that you're starting to wear? Like, was there more tension around like the friendships as well, and people like accepting of who you were now becoming?
Beautiful question. I wouldn't use the word tension. What kind of happened was, for the first period, it was me forcing my way through situations, trying not to drink, and then caving in and drinking, and then feeling terrible. It was like that vibration just wouldn't go inside my body anymore. It was like when I would drink, it used to make me feel great. It used to make me go up. And since 2018, when I drink now, it makes everything me feel go down and go blurry. So it was like, the way that I've understood it is my consciousness arrived at a place where it wasn't making me high anymore. So whenever we talk about like drugs, we say you get high. Well, you get high until you exceed that level of consciousness of what vibration that kind of band of drug is in, whether that be alcohol, weed, ayahuasca, whatever you want to, whichever one you want to talk about. So for me, it was like these years I was still psychologically addicted to the substance socially. So when I was with friends, I would want to drink. I would think of it, but then I would drink and I would be like, oh, this is awful. It's not feeling good in my body. So it was a back and forth for a few years. And that was really challenging because I was in the energy of force. Whenever we're in the energy of force, there's no healing or transformation that can occur. Force can be, masculine energy can be really beneficial, grounded presence. But when we slip into force and we're pushing, that's when we know we need to take a step back, open, step into the divine feminine, and learn, okay, what's really going on here? Why am I going into this energy of force? So when I was forcing myself to not drink, I was hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And it wasn't until I stepped back, started healing the reasons of why I wanted to drink and all of the programs and the wounding, being accepted, not feeling the social anxiety and everything that's underneath there, wanting to be liked by my peers, wanting to be seen as a man, didn't want to be the weird boy that was not drinking club soda at the party, whatever was coming up, all those are true for me. When I was able to step back and start opening, then that started to allow this new version of me to come through. And when that new version arrives, which I don't really want to call it a new version, I would more like to call it the true me, because it's not that it's new, it's I'm getting more in touch with who I really am. The true me, the essence of my soul, that's what's coming online when we do the deep healing. When we start to remove all of the masks, we're removing the false self and we're allowing the true self to shine through. So it's not that a new version was coming through. It's like, no, the real me is starting to shine. The real me that doesn't need this out there, that doesn't need to wear this mask and this mask. The real me can come alive. When that happens, you'll find that a lot of the connections that you made in the past, they can often fall away. And in that can be, there's another layer of challenge of like, damn, I'm now stepping up into this different version of who I really am. And people don't love me for that. And that's challenging. And that's where you've got to do more work. And okay, well, why was I attached to that particular friendship? What were they bringing me? And what was I offering them? And what you often find, the more that you elevate and you heal, is that those connections that you thought maybe were strong or they were good, they're not. And they were surface level, they were superficial, and you don't need those connections in your life anyway. And the more that you heal and go inwards, the only connection you truly need is the connection to yourself and your soul or spirit or whatever. And in that place, that's where you can form much better, real, true, authentic connections, ones that don't need 5 shots of tequila just to be able to talk about something interesting.
Well, Danny, with respect to that, and I appreciate you just kind of clarifying too, kind of what that looked like as you started to elevate yourself. It's almost like giving people some like hope, because we know this journey of change, we talked about it, doesn't happen overnight.
No.
There's going to be back and forth. There's going to be times where you take detours on it. And I always like to say this quote that I heard from a yoga teacher, which is, change, it's hard at first, it's messy in the middle, but it's gorgeous at the end. I'd love to hear you just kind of talk more about some of the tools or the skills that someone should equip themselves with, because the waves that you were talking about, you had to deal with depression and anxiety. Like, what would you offer to someone who's like, okay, I want to get on this road to change, but it's going to be murky, it's going to be muddy, it's going to be messy? Yeah, what tools can they equip themselves with to endure that journey, knowing that it's not going to be an overnight process and it's going to be messy along the way?
Beautiful. Well, I'll share a little bit of the tools that I learned, and then I'll offer my advice. I struggled and suffered, and my struggling and suffering doesn't have to be yours or anyone's. There was a reason that I went down. There's a reason that I'm in this chair talking about this and went down the path that I did and had to learn certain lessons the hard way. And that was for me to be able to authentically sit in this seat with this microphone and share this message that you don't have to try all these different coping mechanisms, which can be wonderful and brilliant. And I did the breath work, I did meditation, I went to Peru, I did the ayahuasca, loads of mushrooms, did all of that. None of it truly created transformation until I found the work that I do now. So there might be necessary stepping stones that people have to take, and that's perfect. I started with, movement and taking cold showers and doing breath work every day, and I started exploring meditation and learning and immersing myself in all this spiritual knowledge and scientific knowledge and quantum physics and all of this stuff. But I would have to do a cold shower. I'd have to get my cold shower in, my 30-minute run, my 30-minute breath work, my 30-minute meditation, and my journaling. That takes me about 3 hours every morning to complete all of that. And after the 3 hours, I've then got to still go work 8 to 10 hours and then cook my meals and do whatever else I want to do and socialize. It's not very realistic to expect yourself to do all of those things just to be okay. And this is where I found this work at Masters of Self University. I found Rachel Fiore. And this work is about energetic transformation. And so instead of just regulating the nervous system and learning coping mechanisms, it's about actually getting the guidance to understand, what are my triggers? What are the programs that I run? Where do they come from? What's actually going on here? Where did this get created? Because if I can find the moment that this wound and program that I'm running was created, and then, and this is the most important part, I can energetically, from my heart center, connect to it and bring the unconditional love that I am to that pain. It has no choice because of energetic entrainment. This is all in quantum physics and science. You can look it all up. It has no choice but to become the love that you are. And that's the journey that I take people on now. So I can't recommend any of those other coping mechanisms or going to do work with shamans because it didn't really work for me. So that's why what I teach now is you are the healing. You just have to learn how to find that within yourself. And that's what I coach people through. It's very basic steps. It's learning how to connect to your own heart center, how to bring that love that's in there, and then find the programs that are causing you any level of disease or suffering or any level of pain, and be able to start to transform them at an energetic level from within yourself. Because I'd read all of this stuff about go within. I was reading all these spiritual texts, all this yogic stuff, like it was all wonderful. It would like really light me up, but there was nobody who was like holding my hand and saying, okay, that's all wonderful. I'm really happy you learned all that. But what I know in my head intellectually doesn't mean anything when I'm showing up every day and I'm feeling anxiety and depression. There's no amount of knowledge that I can accumulate that's going to transform the energy that's in my body right now. So let me learn how to transform the energy. So however it is that you go out there and do that, whether it's you come to MSU and you're interested to learn more, just know that unless you're transforming the energy that's trying to be expressed in whatever that is, whether that's depression, anxiety, whether that's dissociation, whether it's something physically that you're moving through, unless you're transforming the energy, you're probably not healing it. Healing is a permanent transformation at an energetic level. It doesn't reverse. And that's what I teach people, is how to connect to their heart and actually heal.
And I love how you describe it of we got to transform that energy, and how love, unconditional love, bringing an unconditional love to whoever that energy is kind of can help us through that process of transformation. I guess what I'm curious about, Danny, is some of what comes up, like you talk about anxiety and depression, but what about as we're trying to bring transformation to the energy, what if we're grappling with, because we've used these unhealthy coping mechanisms in our past, what if we're dealing with the energy of shame and of guilt? Because we know attached to our past with these coping mechanisms, we've caused hurt to ourselves, to others. We've done some things that we're not happy with as we now look back with a more sober mind. In your coaching work of helping people to transform, how does one overcome the shame and the guilt and still heal? Because shame and guilt it's to me, in my own experience, those are two difficult emotions to overcome. So in your coaching work, how would someone heal those two energies, shame and guilt, that might be associated to their past?
Beautiful. I mean, they are two really difficult emotions to feel, two difficult emotions to heal. And it's never about, oh, let's just pick one emotion and let's just heal shame today. No, it's multifaceted and all multidimensional and all layered. But we don't need to get lost into like the technicalities of it. It's all the same process. It's everything that you just said. You said the energies of shame and guilt, fantastic. Because they are such low vibrations, they require an enormous amount of energetic power, a good amount of love. So we have to first connect to our heart, start building our power to be able to actually, I don't mean power like ruling over people power, I mean divine power, our ability to bring our own divine love to something. So the more that we do this, and it's a process, you don't go to the gym and try and lift 1,000 pounds in your first gym session. You would hurt yourself. It doesn't work like that. You won't be able to lift it. You won't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how hard your body won't let you lift it. Why? Because you need to spend the time growing. You need to learn to grow your power first. So once we connect somebody to their own power, then those lower vibrations, we have more love to bring to them. So it starts with you kind of working with things on the surface, and you go deeper and deeper and deeper. That's why I said earlier, like, it's hard. It's a transformational process. You can't start by going right to the root cause. If you could, that would be fantastic. But generally speaking, you have to work through the layers. So there's layers of shame, there's layers of guilt that organically it unfolds. Now, my experiences with plant medicine can be extremely jarring because they can force things open. And this is what happened to me in 2018. It forced open things that I wasn't ready to actually heal. And that's not anything of the work that I teach. What I teach is what Rachel has taught me, Rachel Fiore, is how to organically open your heart. When you do it like that, it allows your divine power to grow at the same rate as what you're able to heal. So you'll never unearth something through this process that's too painful for you to feel and heal, because that's how the heart works, is we build up these layers of closing to protect ourselves. So when we do it in reverse, it goes the other way. And that's all that it is. So with shame and guilt specifically, yeah, they're super low vibrations. They take a while to heal. I'm still healing layers of my shame and guilt. I know my need's finished, but because of the work that we do at MSU in the process, it allows you to go through incrementally, layer by layer. And there's nothing wrong with shame and guilt. If we didn't have shame and guilt, we wouldn't have the great moral compass as a human. If I was to throw a stone at you right now, Justin, and I didn't feel some level of remorse, of shame and guilt for hurting you, I wouldn't be a very loving being, would I? I mean, come on, I need something in my life to know, oh, I've fallen from grace right now. What I've done, I've fallen from grace. Now, the difference is that shame and guilt a program? Now, a program is something that gets kind of imprinted into us when we're young. And then because we don't know how to open our heart and process it, all of the shame and guilt just keeps building on top of that program. And so what happens is we get triggered into this program, and the reaction that we're having internally does not match what's happening in our life. The guilt and shame that we might feel for something very small might feel really big to us on the inside. And that's because there's a program running. So the more that we energetically learn to love the shame and guilt inside of us, it opens us up, and we can grow in our power. There's nothing wrong with those emotions. And when we arrive at that place of seeing the divinity that they are and loving them, that sets us free. That's what creates that emotional freedom.
I love that as a powerful reframe, Danny, about shame and guilt and how we could actually use them to serve, as you were saying, like kind of an indicator of our own moral compass. Mm-hmm. And that's showing us that we're human beings, and kind of redefining kind of that definition, that negative definition many of us will associate to that connection. And you were starting to talk about how we could kind of really grow and own our power. But I want to get your thoughts on this, because I think for many of us, as we've kind of talked about throughout this conversation, the roots of our past, and you talked, there's layers to this. And many of us, there's like this fork in the road moment where, okay, we could go down this one path of doing that work, getting to that root level, trying to reconnect with our heart space. But then there's also, for some of us, still this blockage. The layers have gotten and packed down and piled on so high that we're unable to detach from our identity to the pain, to the self-sabotaging behavior. And now it's just a core belief in us. Yes. Almost to the point where like we develop this kind of victim consciousness of thinking, I need to drink, I need to watch porn, I need to smoke, I need to do all these things because I'm broken. I can't be fixed. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on just how does one overcome victim consciousness in their journey of overcoming self-sabotaging behaviors? Because again, so much of their identity is just like intertwined to the pain that they can't see clearly that there's any other way out, or that they could be healed from it.
Well, there's two things that come up straight away there with victim consciousness, and what you're asking. The first thing is we need to understand what it means to energetically detach from our programs, and not from an intellectual idea, from actually feeling the experience of what it is like to detach from our shadow. Because we have our true self, our divine self. We have this ego, which we we experience separation. It's all part of the human experience. And then we have our shadow self, which is all of our, we'll call it maybe negative or not so divine parts of us that we accumulated. And so that part of us, when that shows up, that's what causes all of this shame, guilt. That's where all of that lives, in the shadow. So when we can actually learn energetically to feel from the inside, let me detach from this part of me that's showing up right now so I can feel the truth of the situation. There's that old saying, the truth sets you free. It's pretty accurate. When you can feel the truth of what and who you are, which is divine love, which is a divine being, and feel and hold out your programs that you're running in front of you and cause that detachment, then there's a level of healing there and a level of awakening to what it is you are and what it is you're not. And how you achieve that is by breaking everything down through programs. And this is what the basic process called the power within, is all about. So once you're able to start detaching, okay, well, what's going on here? What programs am I running? Then that leads to, well, let's talk about victim consciousness. Now, victim consciousness is made up of two emotional programs. The first one is powerlessness, and the second one is helplessness. So that feeling that, oh, I'm never going to get better, like this is so bad, that all of that victim consciousness, that band of like, oh, woe me, I'm never going to get out of this, I need someone to help, I need someone to save me. All of that stems from the emotional program of powerlessness and helplessness. So when we heal the powerlessness and the helplessness, and we do that by connecting to the divine power that we are, when we're able to drop into our heart, to open ourselves, to feel the programs that are running, to detach from them, to say, oh, here's this powerless part of me that's showing up right now, where I can feel the moment this got created. I was 5 years old, that's when my mum left. Let me bring my unconditional love, what I really am, to this part of me that's in pain right now. Let's allow that part to heal. What the byproduct of when we do that over and over again and work through all the layers is the victim dissolves. There's no more victim when you're connected to your power. There's no more victim when you're looking inside of yourself instead of outside of yourself for help. That program simply dissolves, and that's the work that we always offer, is dissolving the blocks. It's never about forcing them to go away. It's about seeing what they are, seeing what programs are attached to them, healing, dissolving, and then that allows you to have that freedom.
Dan, this is why I was excited to chat with you, because I think that one of the points you make so clearly to so many of us who have dealt with a self-sabotaging past that we've now adapted as our identity, it's really helping us to kind of see through to the truth of that. At the core, truth, goodness, and beauty live inside of all of us, and we need to kind of detach from that. As you were talking, there's like this kind of divine, our true self, and then there's a shadow self, oftentimes formed in our younger years.
Yes.
That if we can connect to our heart space, do the work, and really empower that true self that we have, we can almost help kind of, I'm going to use the word like co-parent or raise, love that shadow self out of that,
Beautiful.
Out of thinking that is who we are, that is our identity, and hopefully helping us to kind of break that cycle of self-sabotaging behaviors, or if not break it, almost when we find ourselves going down that path again, we just understand that, wait, that's not me. That's not me. That's not who I am. That's not what I am on a divine level. And we're able to hopefully like course correct from that. So I don't know if there's any more you want to say about that, but that's kind of what's making clear to me as you talk about this.
You said something critical in that, and this shows how much work you've done in yourself, because you said the word raise that child. You mentioned co-parent. I think you said something like along the lines of, we've got to co-parent the inner child, 100%. We've got to reparent, co-parent, whatever terminology you want to use. But the important part that I was in therapy. I did the whole therapy thing for a few years. Like it was nice to have someone to talk to, but we weren't transforming any pain. I was just talking about our problems, which was helpful for a little while. But it kept me trapped in that, those cycles. And she introduced me to the idea of inner children and that whole idea. And it isn't just about seeing our inner child, validating their pain. It's about elevating them beyond the level of consciousness they are at. So when you said, yeah, we've got to raise them 100%. So this is something that we incorporate called the mystical parent. Now, what that is allowing the child, the inner child, to see from divine eyes what's really going on, why they're in this self-sabotage behavior, and what they need to become, what they need right now to elevate out of the dysfunctional place that they're in. Because if we just validate their pain, if we just bring them the love, that's great, but they're still needing you as the adult version. They're still needing you and your love, and therefore they're staying trapped at that age. But if we're able to bring that love and then go the next stage, become that mystical parent and encourage them, okay, what do you need right now in order to get to the next level so that you don't need me? What do you need right now so that you don't need my love, so that you can realize that you already have all that love within yourself? What do you need right now for you to not make this same self-sabotaging behavior mistake that you keep making over and over again, to elevate out of that place? And that is key. When you said the word like raise them up, 100%, because what happens in our healing journey when we're young, we lose all of these little mini fragments of ourselves. There's a word I love called remember. Remember. This word is key. Every time we go through a trauma, macro or micro in our lives, and we haven't processed that pain, we lose a member of ourselves. And that gets accumulated into our shadow. And when we are healing, we are remembering all of these little members, all of these little parts of us back to ourselves. And when we can remember who we are, then that allows for our shadow, our inner child, to integrate. And that integration process allows for our soul to come more deeply online. And that's the permanent transformation that we all want to embark on. However we go about doing it, doesn't matter. But that's the journey that we're all on. We're remembering who we are. And what we find inside of our own hearts is pretty cool. Let me tell you that. It's pretty magnificent.
And I appreciate you just doing the work and just kind of elevating all of our consciousness in this. And I kind of want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about as we talk about this whole remembering who we are, because as we all kind of grow up, we start to take on the identities that the world gives us. You talked a little bit earlier about like the redefining of masculinity and being a man and a manly man. And I know that's something that you've talked about on the podcast. And I know for myself, a part of this walk has been really, thinking about some of the projections, some of the behaviors being rooted in my own feeding my insecurities around what I thought it meant to be a man. And so I'd love to hear you, Danny, just talk to us about like what that journey, that walk has been like as you're kind of rewriting your own narrative of what it means to be a man, and what's been coming up for you as you've been working through that and kind of just healing that area of your life.
Yeah, it's a big one. And as we were chatting about this, before the podcast, this isn't an area of my healing which is at all complete. I am 100% in the trenches on this one, working on what does it really mean to be a man. And the lie I think that we've all been told, as I alluded to it earlier, is that a man is disconnected from their emotions. A manly man is hard and strong, and while those things might be true, like the strength aspect of masculinity is that, that's our divine nature, definitely is strength. But am I really strong if I can't allow myself to feel shame? Is that strength or is that weakness? Because from my perspective, that's weakness. And that's not to cast any more judgment or shame anyone, but to really sit with, do I really feel strong in all aspects of my life? Mentally, emotionally, physically. And I think there's been a very delusional teaching of what masculinity is. And we can, I'm sure there's other podcasts there that will get into why those those lies have been kind of bred to us on why men should be this certain way. We don't have to get into that right now. But yeah, for me, it's been really understanding that has absolutely nothing to do with divine masculinity. And divine masculinity is a very safe and stable, secure energy. It's that part of all of us. And masculinity, it's in men and women. Yes, predominantly it's more in men. And yes, divine feminine is predominantly more in women. But we all have a mix. We all have a mix of these energies. And that's what creates harmony and balance. If we were all one, that would lead to, I'm sure, what toxic masculinity would be. We need to have that balance, the yin to the yang. Like it's got to come in that way. And true masculine energy has the ability to go into emotion and feel. Like that doesn't, if you're an emotional person, that doesn't mean you're not a man. It means, in my eyes, that you're more closer to what a real man actually is. And I think that term, a manly man, I think that term will die off. I don't think it's something that in a few years someone would want to be associated with. When we really wake up and we start really elevating and evolving, I think that term has these connotations that are attached to men being weak if they feel, or men being weak if they cry. I have a feeling that the more that sensitive men start showing up and opening up and showing that you can still be completely strong, completely in your power, and allowed to feel the sadness and the emotion of a particular situation, I think that concept of a manly man will die and a new divine warrior, a new divine man will emerge, and there'll be an entirely different phrase. But honestly, Justin, I'd love to hear I'd love to go back and forth on this. Like, how do you view yourself in that light? And what's your journey been like with it?
Yeah, it's been quite the eye-opening journey for myself as I've again started to try to take responsibility and accountability for my own toxic programs of narcissism and other unhealthy habits. It's like all of these things that I thought were things I should be pursuing. Women, how much I can bench press, all these other really superficial things. In the end, it was just really trying to fill a void of really what I really needed as a man, which is connection, love, all these things that I'm not having conversations growing up with my male friends or my brothers and my siblings about. And so hearing you talk about this divine masculine being defined as safe, stable, and secure, part of my journey now has been how do I find that in myself, but not in these vanity metrics,
exactly,
not in the insecurity, and doing that inner work to kind of redefine that for myself. It's I could kind of care less about some of these, again, outside definitions of what it means to be a man, but I feel more secure in myself because I know I'm someone who can be loyal and honest and kind of have all these additional other qualities that bring me more integrity versus,
beautiful,
like I said, some of the superficial stuff. But we're not taught that. It's a reprogramming. There's a lot of insecurity that gets kind of tapped into it as I've gone through that journey. And so that's why I appreciate you just kind of cracking that nut open, because it's something that for many of us men, we kind of sweep under the rug. We struggle with in silence. Yes. But until many of us start to kind of spotlight all of these insecurities that we hold, and we're like, oh wait, I'm not the only person struggling or dealing with trying to show up how I think you want me to show up. When like I said, deep inside, that's really not my true earlier identity of who I am. And if we could start as men starting to embrace that or give each other the space to feel safe amongst each other, we'll elevate together. Yeah. We'll so elevate together. And that's going to create better relationships with each other, with our partners, and really kind of help elevate our world.
Yeah, man. Beautifully said. And I think, for me, I remember, growing up, there might have been, a few guys that really felt like they had it together. And maybe they had, more stable childhoods. I'm not entirely sure. But I think there's a lot of men that are suffering in silence. Is you touched on it, like they're looking at everyone else and thinking, oh, I should be like them, like, and judging themselves and feeling that insecurity. One of the things I'd love to bring up was I had this really weird, I say weird now, I had a very interesting obsession with ladyboy porn. I was like, well, what is this about? But I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to, because there was so much shame tied around. And I kept on playing the program of, if I'm into this, then I can't be a man. Like, there's no way I can have this, like, this sexual fantasy and still be a man. Like, that's impossible. But as I went in and kind of have healed this wound now for the last couple of years, it's wild, because I'm not even attracted to it at all anymore. And it was all based upon this part of me that I had to suppress as a child, which was starting to get a little curious with my sexuality. But because I was never allowed to just explore or entertain that idea, it became a huge part of my shadow and something I felt deep amount of shame for. My dad would always make comments about me not, me being into women and all these kind of things. And I would hold so much shame for even entertaining the idea. And then over the last couple of years, finding this work and processing the shame, it's actually, that whole fantasy is completely dissolved. And that came from not the place that I'm at now. It came from the accepting every part of me and finding security that it doesn't matter what I'm into. That doesn't make me more or less man. It doesn't matter what my sexuality is. That doesn't make me less or more manly. What makes me manly is me. I am. That's me. Let me go in and connect to my own divinity, and that's what makes me who I am. That gives me the sense of worth, the security. And every time that I look for it outside of me, that's the invitation to, drop back in. You've got some work to do.
Yeah. And I appreciate you offering that. And that's kind of one of the things, Danny, it's hard to find men who are really open and willing to raise their hand and kind of talk about some of these struggles that so many of us deal with. Substance abuse, pornography, and it's something I've talked about on the podcast here. And for my own journey with it, it was like I was searching for connection.
Yeah.
I didn't feel confident in myself, but porn served as an opportunity for me to connect. And especially in times where I didn't feel good about myself or whatever it might have been. And so being able to kind of like heal that, understand that, become more secure in myself and work through healing kind of that vice. Mm-hmm. It's been, really kind of powerful to kind of like walk away from that guilt, from that shame, understanding its connections to my dysfunctional childhood around sex and sexuality as well. And it's like also to what you just kind of hit on at the end there is like then accepting it all, like accepting all of the different parts of ourselves, putting it all out there, essentially all the baggage that we got, carrying it with us. Like, all right, this is my baggage. I'm bringing it to the table. Yep. It's coming with me. I've learned how to love it. I've learned how to appreciate it, even including that which doesn't serve me, because I know that I'm, again, secure enough in myself moving forward of like, that's not the true me. This is the true me, but I still accept those hidden and wounded parts of myself from my past.
Have you seen the latest Barbie film at all?
I have not. Okay. I have not. I've heard a lot of like people sharing me that I need to go see it, but like anything you want to share that you've taken away from checking it out?
No, this isn't to say whether or not you should go watch the film. It's it's for you to decide. But one of the good things about it is that it does create a level of, you can see it in the collective. You can see the way that men really have been programmed to get their worth from what they look like. And women, it's exactly for them too. But for us men, it's like, if you've got a big chest and you look like this, well then you're manly and you've got shredded abs. And, this is something that I've been through, still working through. I've had to step away from all of that in the gym. I work out entirely differently now. I'm not chasing an aesthetic look. I'm looking for like internal health, for movement. But in doing that, I had to let go. There were so many parts of me that were just holding on to what I looked like. And there are so many collective programs that come from society, and these are tricky because they might not relate back to a particular moment of your childhood. They're just always there. They're always there. They're always running, and we're living in this dimension, this third dimensional thing of separation and physicality. And what we're being invited right now is to elevate out of that and to not need, okay, well, my worth comes from me having a six pack and a massive chest and huge shoulders, and that makes me strong. No, what makes you strong is your ability to connect to your heart and feel your pain. And that's my definition of masculinity and strength.
Yeah, so well said, especially the gym reference totally sticks with me. I think about that, like, yeah, you've got to be 6'4", like you said, bench press the most,
man.
shredded body, all of that kind of stuff. And slowly too, through the work, being able to kind of step away from that and just kind of understand, like, yeah, it's not important. It really doesn't, like, what does it truly mean? Has kind of given me a new light and feeling just at ease and at peace with myself and who I am. And we're all spiritual beings. And so it's like, yeah, we've got these outside containers of a human body. This is something I've learned from Rachel. We've got these outside containers of a human body, but as a spiritual being, you're limitless, you're endless.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really put that in a box. And that type of depth is kind of really what I'm leaning into more to define myself versus this outward shell that you see.
Beautiful. And it doesn't mean not to go work out. It doesn't mean not to take care of your body. It's about the energy at which we do things from. So you can still be, really connected to yourself and really connected to your own heart and your own soul and still want to pursue that. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are pursuing that, if you listen to this podcast and you are pursuing that, maybe just have a minute to just check in with yourself and say, well, why am I doing this? Is it because I want to look a certain way? Because if I look that way, these are the two that come up for me. Either guys will think that I'm good, like a worthy masculine competitor or whatever, or a woman will find me attractive. And it's normally one or the other. And I think most guys that are really hitting the bench really hard, it's got more to do with, some issue they've got in their childhood than to do with actually trying to maintain a healthy physique.
And this kind of brings it all full circle, Danny, because I think a conversation like this, again, 5 years, 10 years ago, this wasn't something I was ready to even, I wouldn't have known how to approach, even have. Yeah. And so I guess where I want to, before we get into the each one, teach one, where I want to just kind of finally talk about is the aspect of grace and surrender, because this is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And there's something I've heard you say, which is, I've realized I'm trying to heal to get to the end instead of appreciating the journey and where I'm at and the journey that I'm on. So can you just kind of share more about what you've learned about surrendering and having patience, especially for those of us who are starting this journey, but are like, we want the pain, we want the healing, we want the transformation to end and happen tomorrow?
Yeah, well, in this life path that I'm on, this is surrender is if there is one word that I've had to constantly come back to in terms of divine characteristics, we call them the ways of oneness at MSU, it's surrender. And it's constantly being brought to me, constantly to learn deeper and deeper and deeper of what does that actually mean? What does it mean to surrender? And whenever there's surrender, there's always a level of resistance and control, powerlessness. These are the programs that always kind of block us from being in surrender. And this is the work that I teach is like, okay, great. Like, let's go into surrender, but let's also look at what's blocking you from being the surrender, because surrender is what we already naturally are in our heart, but we have all of these programs and wounds which block us from that. So surrender is this flow, this openness, this ease, fluidity. So what programs are causing me to not be in that energy? And for me, it's all of these control programs of not wanting to feel out of control, of wanting to control my journey. I remember in 2021 when I went to the ayahuasca retreat that I did in Peru, that was the big thing that came through was I just heard this one of the words in the full ceremony was, everything is perfect. And I realized the whole time that I was there on this 2-week trip, I was so focused on healing that I wasn't even in surrender. And if you can't even be in surrender, there's going to be no healing that's taking place, because you're like this, you're holding on so tight, you're resisting everything. And until you really arrive at that place of just being like, it's going to happen, drop in, breathe, and allow what to be there. And that flow allows that grace to come in and happen. And it's a constant thing. I think that line that you read out, like that was maybe a couple of weeks ago or a month ago for me. It's constant new layers of like, oh, I'm still grasping really tight on this thing. I'm still trying to get to the end instead of being in surrender. And when we are in that place, that's when the gratitude, the appreciation, that's when those like beautiful states of consciousness and mind arrive, when we're able to authentically be in surrender, to be open to what's happening. And, you know, when there's a kid that's inside that really doesn't like what's happening to him and he's very sensitive, which was my case, there's a lot of wounding that's in there. There's a lot of resistance to feeling. There's a lot of resistance to processing all of the powerlessness and the energy. And so making sure when it comes to surrender, we're identifying, okay, this is where I'm resisting. This is where I'm controlling. This is where I still feel powerless. That's going to alleviate the blocks to allow you to be in that energy.
Thank you for offering that, because that speaks to me, that kid inside of me that wants to force it, that doesn't want to be patient, but just knowing like that resistance, it's just going to delay things. So you might as well just kind of go with the flow, let life happen, enjoy it, enjoy the process as much as possible, and continue to be mindful of that. So thank you for that, Danny. So next up, Danny, is our each one teach one rapid fire questions, Danny. So I got 4 questions for you. So are you ready for our first one?
Let's roll.
All right. So the first question I got for you, Danny, what's one book that you recommend that has been a game changer for you?
Well, it's got to be Rachel Fiore's Ways of Oneness book, of course.
Yes.
Like mine's super highlighted all over. I read it multiple times a month. I just pick up and go in. It's a solid read. It's a blueprint for healing and achieving enlightened states and whatnot. But honestly, for the most part, I wouldn't recommend reading books. I would recommend seeking out good coaching, transformational healing, because when I first started the work that I do now, Rachel told me stop reading books and learn this work. Learn it, feel it, energetically connect to it, become this work, integrate it, because we've grown up in a world that's really addicted to our minds, and we often try to intellectualize our healing, which makes us want to get to the end instead of actually being in the now, we're just talking about. So the more that we can disconnect from the mind and just focus on our healing journey in our heart, it's going to help us way more than any intellectual knowledge can. So the best book you can ever read is stopping that, finding the guidance, and healing.
I love that. I've never heard that, so I appreciate that answer right there. And in a little bit, we'll talk about how people can connect with you if they want to explore some transformative coaching. So the next question that I'm curious to learn from you, Danny, is what's one habit or practice that has been impactful for you in your lifestyle design?
Dropping into your heart, energetically connecting to the power that you are, and learning how to bring that love to absolutely anything that you're going through. Whether it's you're stuck in traffic, whether it's you waking up in the morning and you just need to take a moment to connect. That is the foundation of everything that I do in my life, is to become more heart-centered. Who does not want to become more loving? Who does not want to become more empowered as a being? And that's where all of the amazing ways of oneness flow through: surrender, responsibility, patience, love, all of the amazing divine characteristics that are all in your heart. You first have to learn to open it. So that is always the practice. However it is that you learn how to connect to your heart center, not your heart, not the physical beating thing, the energetic center that is connected directly to your soul. That is you, the highest version.
Mm. And throughout this conversation, I feel like you've kind of helped open that space up for myself just in our talk. So
Good.
I appreciate that. I can only imagine what it's like for the audience tuning in and listening and watching this. So the next question I got for you is, if you could create one law or policy that everyone would need to abide by, what would it be?
That the only people who make law and policy are enlightened beings, because there's a lot of people who don't know anything making laws for all of us, and that makes it a very interesting and difficult world to live in. But if we elevate our consciousness to a level that is actually one of love, then we would live in a much better world. So that would be my first law, and then it would affect all the rest.
Well said there. And then the final question that I'm asking to all of our guests this season, since this season's a lot about overcoming self-sabotage and other different things, what's one piece of advice you'd offer to someone who's struggling but wants to stop undermining their own happiness?
Get the proper coaching. Do the real work. Find somebody who they don't have to be at the end, but at least started to walk the path of healing. Whoever that is, that you can really feel in your heart, this person can help me. Invest in that. It is worth it. It is your mental, emotional well-being. Your life is affected in every manner by your mental, emotional state. So if you're struggling with self-sabotage, is finding out the programs that are created causing you to self-sabotage. So figuring out that, finding someone who can guide you on that journey will transform your life radically.
And thank you for highlighting the importance that folks do not need to do this alone. If anything, don't do this alone. You need a guide, and there's folks out there who've walked this journey in front of you, who are equipped with the tools and the insight that can support you, that can guide you in overcoming self-sabotage. So thank you, Danny. And so I guess with that said, Danny, could you share more about what's next for you, and where can people go to learn more and find out about you and the coaching that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned earlier, I'm a mystical life coach at Master of Self University, which is an organization created by Rachel Fiore, my mentor, and we offer the the foundational course that we move all our students and clients through is called The Power Within. That's if you're interested in learning everything that I've been talking about, how to connect to your heart, see the programs, find out where they came from. We offer it in 3 different ways. You can either do it individually, one-on-one, which is going to be the most intimate level. We also offer it in a relationship format, so you can do that with your partner. And this is my favorite. We also do this in groups. So Ellie and I are currently on our third or fourth weekend with the current group that we've got now. We bring these out. It's a lot more affordable, given that it's group work, and it's so much fun because you get to heal in oneness. You get to come together as a group, as a community. You realize a lot of your crazy stuff that you're working through, because the mind is crazy. A lot of that stuff everyone else is dealing with, and it's the same format, same process of what we offer at the Power Within, just in a group. So I'd highly recommend it. I started my work on this journey doing group work, and it was really, really transformational. So my Instagram is DannyMorley_MSU, or you can find me on the masterofselfuniversity.com website. And did that answer your question?
Did, Danny. And everything that you shared about the website, your handle, I'll be sure to include in the show notes so folks can know where to kind of learn more and tap into all you do. And again, I just want to uplift your story, Danny, your journey, your openness, everything that you've shared, because oftentimes a lot of people will do this struggling in silence, but for you to raise your hand and say, hey, for those out there who maybe don't feel as comfortable opening up and putting themselves out there, you're putting yourself out there, you're putting your light, your energy, even as you're in the midst of your own transformation and offering that. And clearly it's touched me to the point where I was like, I got to reach out. I got to have you on, because you've made such an impact on me. And I know you're doing that for so many others. So I just appreciate the conversation today, everything about embracing our pain and ways that we can overcome self-sabotaging behaviors. Also, the importance of just connecting with ourselves, giving ourselves grace, breaking away from this victim consciousness that so many of us can latch onto as a part of our identity, which is not our true self. I just thank you for your continued just offerings in this space and everything that you're doing and passing along that you learned from Rachel to us all. Because like I said, you're just making such a positive impact for so many individuals and including myself. So thank you for your time today.
Oh, no, thank you so much for doing the work as well and being the change, really being the change and having me on this awesome platform. And, we all want to live in a more loving world. I think you could ask anyone on earth, they would say, yeah, I want that. But few people are actually willing to do the work to actually find that in themselves and to actually create that earth. So this podcast, your journey, all of this, this is creating that new earth of love. So thank you for the light that you bring and giving me a chance to share. So yeah.
Awesome stuff. So folks, that is it for today's show. I'd like to thank you all again for your presence and tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please show your support by sharing the Living Once Twice podcast on LinkedIn, Instagram, or wherever, leaving us a review on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Also, give us a follow on Instagram at Living Once Twice. Reaching out to you all through the time and the space that separates us to say, remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Catch you later on Living Once Twice.